the channel. I'm speaking to you from Scottsdale, Arizona on a Thursday. And a shout out to all you aviators around the world. Uh, Bienvenue à tous. There's my French. Bienvenidos a todos si estás viendo en otro país. Welcome, everybody. I'm just going to go through some questions here, and I'll try and answer them the best I can, and I'll give you some background as far as learning and teaching and training. If you are learning to fly, I would recommend that you experience and that you respect the law of recency. The law of recency basically says that if you do something often enough, you won't have to review it. And that applies to anything, not just flying airplanes. I gave about 5,000 hours of instruction, and my students who flew twice a week or less averaged about 70 plus hours before they got their private pilot exams. My students who flew two times a week. What was it? Did I say 3 times? Okay, I got a little confused. If you fly 3 times a week or more, you'll average 50 plus hours for your private license. If you fly twice a week or less, you'll average 70 plus hours. And that's just because of the law of recency. If you want to save money, fly more, not less. It's just more efficient. You're not going to spend an extra 20 hours reviewing what you've forgotten, and that applies just about anything. But that's my biggest recommendation, especially now because it's so expensive to learn how to fly. I'm just looking at some other questions here. There's so many. One of the challenges you'll have when you're learning how to fly is something called a negative transfer. If you've been driving a car, you're going to have a temptation to steer with the yoke, the steering wheel that sits in front of you. That's normal. I did. Everybody does. If you have any experience with tractors, you actually have a leg up because you steer an airplane just like you do a piece of heavy machinery with your feet. But that's always a little bit of a challenge for people just starting out. It's a lot of information. It's different. It's exciting. It's fun. It's new. Hopefully you'll find an instructor who gets you set up with a good syllabus. There should be no surprises when you're learning how to fly. You should have not just a textbook and a workbook and questions. You should have an outline as far as what to expect before each and every lesson. So that you can also ask questions, and hopefully at the conclusion of your lesson, if you have a good instructor, and there's a lot of good ones out there, there'll be a good post-flight discussion as far as what you covered, what you can do better, and what to expect on the following lesson. One thing a lot of students are required to do is to do a proper pre-flight. And there's a checklist for that, and you'll use that checklist. But something that will help a lot of you is at the completion of your pre-flight, it's just a good idea to actually take a step back from the airplane a little bit. Because one thing I've noticed, and it happened to me too, if you're standing really close to the aircraft, you kind of miss the big picture. You don't see other things around the airplane maybe as well, or you may not notice things as well. Is the tail really untied? Are the chocks really removed? Are the fuel caps really on? So it's not a bad idea after you follow the pre-flight checklist just to take a couple steps back and take a close look at a distance. Otherwise, you might miss something, and you don't want to have a surprise like trying to taxi with the tail still tied down or a chalk that wasn't removed. Sometimes there's also obstructions that you don't notice, like you're going to have to taxi in an area that's kind of restricted and it doesn't have a lot of space. It's kind of a good idea to step away from the aircraft and do that. So I'm just going through some questions, but if you guys have any questions you'd like to ask, again, it's Carlos PC747. My very first stream, I gave about 5,000 hours of instruction, and I don't know it all. I'm not the repository of all knowledge. I'm learning more every day from people just like you. And I'm talking to you from Scottsdale, Arizona. I want to talk about how to land a plane. That's Probably one of the toughest things for a lot of pilots. There's a lot of rote techniques. That means techniques that are memorized. It doesn't require any correlative thought. Some rote suggestions are things like if you're going to land an airplane, you need to have the yoke all the way back, or you need to listen to the stall warning horn, or you need to cover up the runway with the nose. Those are all great suggestions. There's another thing that you can use, a tool that I learned. It's a correlative technique. All aircraft have approximately 10 seconds of kinetic energy with which to land. That's 10. Doesn't matter if it's a 747, 777, an Airbus, or a 152 or a Cherokee. If you're coming in at the correct approach speed, you will have approximately 10 seconds of kinetic energy with which to play with. What does that mean? Consider counting out loud after the flare, because if you do, that will provide you a correlative reference with which to land a plane. So if you're about to land on the numbers 1, 2, or 3, that's indicative of high kinetic energy, low angles of attack, and the airplane's just not ready to land. The higher numbers, like past the number 5, number 6, number 7, number 8, the aircraft will be ready to land. You'll have less kinetic energy, higher angle of attack, and an airplane that's ready to land. When I incorporated that technique for my students, they reduced their time to solo about 3 hours. And I think the reason I was able to lower their time that much was because there wasn't an inordinate amount of time spent trying to keep both of us from crashing. What do I mean by that? Well, when a lot of instructors are teaching students, and there's a lot of good ones, they actually try and have all students land on all 3 axes right away. And that's pretty tough because there's a lot going on and the instructor is imparting a lot of knowledge, but it's really tough for students to be able to do a lot of that quickly on all 3 axes. So you know what I do? I teach 1 axis at a time. I start with the elevator first, then the ailerons, and then the rudder. With the elevator, I'll get the aircraft maybe 5 feet above the runway. I'll set the power, and I'll ask the student just to keep the airplane there. The great thing about starting landings without landing is it gives them the opportunity to work on their finesse. If you have the power off, you're not really given a lot of time to work on your finesse. And then you have to add power and go around again. It's better for students if you just have the instructor add power and then just stay 5 feet above the runway, work on your finesse, and go down the runway. Typically, 2 circuits around the pattern is sufficient, and then their finesse is pretty good. Then the next thing I will do with them is I will work on just the ailerons. And the way I do that is I will, on final, not have the airplane lined up on final. I will have it offset on the extended center line. With my feet on the rudders and their hands on the hand controls, I'll ask them just to slide through the extended center line with the ailerons. And we'll go through the extended center line, and then they'll go through the other way, and then they'll go through the other way. Single axis training with the ailerons, that's how we do it. And then the last axis that I work on is the rudders. Someone might ask, how do you train single axis training with the rudders? Well, I'll tell you. While I'm flying the aircraft, I will ask them to put their feet on the rudder pedals, and I'll ask them to sit on their hands. Yeah. Why? Because if they're not sitting on their hands, they're going to have the temptation to try and control the airplane with the yoke. So I have them sit on their hands. And then what I do on final, when I'm not lined up with the runway, I'll ask them to keep the nose straight as I slide with ailerons through the extended center line from side to side. Now, when I start the turns, at first the nose will follow the direction of the turn and the nose won't be straight, but sure enough, after a couple times going through the extended center line, they'll keep the nose straight. How about that? So the key to reducing the amount of time students need in order to solo is simplifying how the controls work. Here's a question for anybody if you want to try and answer this question. In a no-win condition, this question's for anybody. What would make an airplane drift on final, for example, from right to left? What would make an airplane drift to the left if there's no wind? Here's the answer. The left wing's lower than the right. Likewise, if there's no wind at all and the airplane is drifting to the right, what would cause it to drift to the right? The right wing's lower than the left. Who knew, huh? This is about simplifying the axes for students, making it fun. I hope I'm making it fun for all of you. I do see some questions and kind commentary. I don't have my glasses on, and I'm sorry I can't read all of those, but I'm going through a list of some larger questions that I have right here. I'm delighted to have all of you. I'm Carlos, PC747. I've been flying for over 40 years. I started when I was 16. And the largest aircraft I flew was a 747. I have also been flying the 777. But I love the small aircraft, and my favorite aircraft is the 152. I confess, it's the 152. There's a lot to like about training aircraft. Oh, there's other good aircraft as well, but I have a special affection for the 152. I'm going to go through some more questions here and try and answer some of the more common questions that people might ask. Here's a question that's kind of tough. There's a lot of good instructors out there, but they're not all great. And it might be kind of difficult to determine what's a good instructor and what isn't, especially if you don't have any background. And that's something that's kind of tough for someone who has no flight experience and they just want to learn how to fly. And are they really thinking about the kind of instructor? Probably not. And sometimes it doesn't work out too well for the student because the instructor may not be preparing for the lesson as much as they should, may not care for the student as much as they should. So is it really kind of a luck of the draw? In some ways it is. It was for me, but I was lucky in one respect. Most of my instructors were good. They weren't all exactly the same, which is also ideal. It's good when you're learning how to fly to have stage checks and go up with different instructors, because some instructors will typically see things that maybe another instructor may not notice. Here's another thing that you should know. For any of you who are getting prepared for your exams, whether it's a private pilot flight test, an instrument test, or a CFI, no examiner wants to fail a student. I don't care what their reputation might be. There's no examiner that looks forward to failing someone. If they're going to fail you, it's because something is lacking and they need a reason to fail you. But no instructor, no examiner wants to ever fail anybody. What helps is having the right attitude. Likewise, when you have your exams, you're not supposed to know everything. But at least if you know where to find things, that's the key. Will you know where to find something if the examiner asks? There tends to be weakness in the maintenance aspect of aircraft. Maintenance logs, airframe logs, how many students actually spend a lot of time looking at those? Not a lot. And they need to spend more time looking at that kind of stuff. Airworthiness directives. So again, you can't know all the answers and no examiner wants to fail you. When I would send my students to an examiner, I would send them to the most difficult examiner, not the easiest. Why would I do that? Well, I'll tell you. When you send a student for a flight test, it's really an examination of the instructor and their teaching methods. If the instructor is secure about their teaching methods, they won't have any problem sending an instructor to the most difficult examiner because their students will be prepared, so they have nothing to worry about. And by the way, no flight tests are ever perfect. All answers are never perfect. It's part of the learning process. Most examiners will want you to learn a thing or two, and they'll want to teach you a thing or two as well. Even if you're getting most of the questions right, they're there to help you and foster your knowledge. A private pilot license is a license to learn. The real learning begins after you get your license. That's when the real learning begins. Let me go through some more questions. I'm sorry I can't read all your kind comments down here. Let's see if I can find a good one for you. Let's see, checklists, self-explanatory. A lot of accidents have happened because people don't run through checklists. Another easy way to have a problem is if you accept something and you're not ready for it. For example, taking off when you shouldn't be. It's very difficult when you're holding short at the end of a runway, a towered airport, and the tower says, "Can you accept an immediate takeoff?" It's pretty tough to say no when you're not ready. But that's what you should do. If you're not ready, you shouldn't take off. You should let them know. Let's keep going through more questions. I hope you're having fun. Again, I'm talking to you from Scottsdale, Arizona. And what else can I tell you? A little bit more background about me. I did decades of jet charter as well. Part 135 corporate. I was also Carroll Shelby's personal pilot. That's right, the car guy, Shelby Cobra, Shelby Mustang. I was his pilot. He had a 1,700-acre ranch in Mount Pleasant, Texas. Nice old cowboy. He was once a pilot too. So what's required in order to solo an airplane? It's not just about being able to fly. It's about exercising good judgment. When you can exercise a consistent amount of judgment, the instructor will sign you off for solo. Your goal is to have the instructor stop talking. Because if they're not talking, there's no reason for them to, because you're doing everything right. So that's just a little bit tidbit of information for you. What else can I help you with? This is something more for non-pilots. Aircraft, just because they have seats, doesn't mean that you can fill all the seats. If an aircraft has 4 seats, you can't just throw 4 people in an aircraft with baggage. There are limitations, performance limitations. A lot of people get in trouble because they think, oh, it has 4 seats. It's like my Ford Mustang. I can just throw the family and everybody in and go. That's not true. That's not true at all. There are weight limitations that have to be respected. Let's see if we can keep going through a couple more questions here. My goodness. Probably one of the scariest things for students is practicing stalls. Imminent stalls, full stalls. It's scary, and I don't blame you. It's done for several reasons. It's done to build your confidence in different flight regimes. That's why we do them. And also for avoidance about certain attitudes that are not safe. So that if you find yourself in a situation, for example, if you're doing a go-around and you have a very high nose attitude, it may not be a bad idea to add full power or lower the nose and just go around and try again. You don't have to land the plane. That's always an option, going around. Let me take a look at what else I've got here. One of the things that you have to know when you take your private pilot exam is understanding controlled airspace. When they're talking about controlled airspace, there's really 2 types of control. There's weather control and communications control. You won't see that in any book. Example of communications control are Class A, above 18,000, Class B, Class C, Class D, tower airports, and Class E, when there's no tower but the weather goes below 3 miles. Those are examples of communications requirements. The other type of control has to do with weather control. If you look at a VFR chart, you'll see a lot of magenta circles around airports, but not all. Why? Because the airports that have magenta circles around them have a change in the altitude of controlled airspace. Why would they do that? Well, they're trying to protect people who are conducting instrument approaches from VFR aircraft. As you get closer and closer to airports that serve instrument approaches, the weather conditions, the weather restrictions will get higher and higher. And as you get further away from those airports, they will become less restrictive. But that's why that you have that. Let's see what else you have. Should I become a professional pilot if it's a passion of yours? Absolutely. I did when I was 16. I don't regret it. It's been exciting flying around the world. I've been to some places I can't pronounce, places in South America, the Seychelles, off the east coast of Africa, Mozambique, Uruguay, uh, Perth, Australia, Sydney, Australia, in Japan, many cities, China, Vietnam, Hanoi. Very thankful for all of it. Um, are there pluses and minuses? Absolutely, in any job. Airline pay is pretty darn good. It's a little tough though, being away from home. Uh, on the downside, being away, that can cost families. That's one of the things a lot of pilots don't talk about too much. Being away from your kids, missing your son's baseball game, missing your daughter's volleyball tournament, missing a birthday that your wife might have had. But uh, most families are typically supportive of their husbands and boyfriends or girlfriends in the career. I think if you're happy at doing something, you'll tend to be more loving and kinder to the people that you love. Very thankful. Let me go on to some more questions. Instrument rating. How tough is an instrument rating to get? It's a lot tougher because it's a professional rating. It's not, uh, it's almost like learning how to fly all over again. You're learning how to fly in the same manner as the airlines. Every single one of their flights is an IFR flight. You have to learn a whole new subset of procedures and call outs and things. So it's not easy. We've had some improvements with GPS and navigation, but it's still tough. It's very, very tough. And it's also tough because a lot of times you can't see very much outside, or you can't see outside at all. You have to have a good scan. And you also have to be careful because sometimes you're going to be going to airports where you may not be able to land. And if that's the case, you're going to need to go someplace else. And some people get in trouble because they get their itis, and they conduct an approach in weather conditions that are less than ideal. So what do I tell people about instrument ratings? It's a convenience rating, but it shouldn't be used with the expectation that you're always going to get there, because sometimes you're not going to get there, or at least you shouldn't try to get there when the weather's not the best. Let's keep going through some questions, and then I'll conclude. What's the difference between a Part 61 and a Part 141 school? I went to Embry-Riddle in Prescott, Arizona, a great school, some amazing instructors. That was a Part 141 school. A 141 school is typically has a different set of standards, more stringent, more strict standards. If you're going to do the airline route, it would probably be ideal for you to do the 141 route because it's sort of tailored for airlines as far as stage checks and whatnot. But there are a lot of very good Part 61 mom and pop schools as well. I started in Part 61 schools, and they were fantastic. And most of the instructors were fantastic too. They're probably going to be a little cheaper, Part 61 versus 141. So that's a consideration. Um, so that's something you have to think about. What GPA matters for pilot hiring? That's kind of a tough one because for decades, airline pilots had to have four-year degrees, but that's not so much the case anymore. A lot of pilots have been hired without four-year degrees. Some airlines required people with military experience, no longer required anymore. Wouldn't be a bad idea to have a degree as a fallback in case you get furloughed. That's something that the industry hasn't experienced in a long time, a real furlough. I have a friend of mine who was with US Airways for 18 years. He only flew 5. That's right, he was furloughed for 13 years. Some of us older pilots call it the lost generation because a lot of pilots who sacrificed missed out on the golden opportunity that just happened within the last 2 years as far as pilot hiring. So I'm delighted for all the young people, men and women who are out there now. This is fantastic for the industry. CRM, Cockpit Resource Management. Maybe you've heard of it, maybe you haven't. It wasn't a big deal or really well known a couple years ago, but it's been discovered through safety analysis that if people are willing to demonstrate concern for each other, it enhances safety. But that wasn't always the case. For many years, it was put up and shut up. When I was starting to fly in the late 70s and early 80s, gear up and shut up. It was just a different era back then. The captain ruled the roost. And as a result, unfortunately, there were some accidents that occurred because some pilots didn't want to speak up. Well, now because of CRM and something called SMS, Safety Management Systems, we have tools in which we can enhance safety and mitigate hazards. And CRM has gone a long way to preventing accidents. Let's go through just one more question here, maybe two. Some of these questions are kind of funny. Here's a question. Have you ever not allowed a student to get checked out in a plane? Yeah, there was one time I couldn't let a student get checked out in a plane. Nice kid. He couldn't speak English. You need to be able to speak English. So I was flying out of Hawthorne Airport near LAX. He couldn't speak English. We never even got the motor started. So yeah, there was one time I couldn't let a student get checked out. But we were safe and he was safe. What other questions do I have for you? Something interesting. Rushing is one thing that you want to avoid in training, flight training, as well as operationally. It just will get you into trouble. What's an example of rushing? Accepting a takeoff clearance when you're not ready. I'm guilty of it. It takes a lot of maturity to, when the tower says, "Are you ready to go?" to say no. If you're not ready, don't go. Let's continue. As far as communicating with air traffic control, it's a little scary and it's a little intimidating at first. As you practice more and more, you will actually be able to anticipate what the control tower is going to tell you before they tell you. It just takes spending time. What else can I find here? Should I become a flight instructor? I do have more respect for people who became flight instructors. I gave about 5,000 hours myself because I love teaching. You don't have to be a flight instructor in order to build flight time. You don't. There's other ways that you can build flight time, banner tow, pipeline patrol. You really do learn a lot in having to teach students a lot about yourself and about aerodynamics and things. My recommendation, if you had a choice, become a flight instructor. I miss it, but in a way I can sort of teach it a little bit to you guys right here. So I'm delighted about that. What else do I have here for you? What is your favorite airplane to fly? Do you guys have any favorite aircraft to fly, either as pilots or passengers? As a pilot, again, for me, a 152. That's what I started in. It's my favorite airplane. What are your favorite airplanes? What about as a passenger? What is your favorite airplane to fly as a passenger? I'm sorry I can't read your questions. I don't have my glasses. But some of the aircraft that I like, the Airbus A350, and also the Dreamliner, of course. I've always liked the 747 and the 777. Here's one thing that was much different with the 747 compared to the 777. When I would come back from Asia in the 747 and it was fully loaded, we had to make a fuel stop in Anchorage every single time. But in the 777, when we were loaded, taking off out of Japan, we never had to stop. We never had to stop in Anchorage. We could go nonstop all the way. 777's a lot more efficient, much more efficient. But I do miss the space in the 747 a lot upstairs. There's more room to walk around, especially on the converted passenger 747s. What was my favorite long haul route? And what's still my favorite long haul route? Any westbound flight from the United States to Asia. It's just a little more chill. For those of you who haven't flown over water on long haul, Flying over the Atlantic is a little bit, it's a little stricter, a little bit more stressful. But flying over the Pacific, it's just way more chill. I like getting in the plane, taking off, and going 13, 14, 15 hours to Japan or Seoul. It's just way more chill. Let's see. And again, I'm sorry I can't read your questions. My final thing that I'll share with you before I take off, if you're learning to fly, my recommendation, fly a minimum of 3 times per week. Why? Law of recency. What's that? It just says that if you're not doing something often enough, you're going to forget it. My students who flew twice a week or less had 70 plus hours when they took their exams. Those who flew 3 times a week or more had 20 hours less total time. That's right, 50 plus hours. So if you really want to save money, fly more per week. And then you won't spend all that extra money reviewing things that you might have forgotten. Let's see, are there any other, is that about it? I don't know. Goodness. Checking right here. I think that'll do it. I want to thank everybody for joining. Well, you know, I do have 4 viewers, and again, I can't read your questions. We do have something called SMS. Most flight schools have incorporated some version of SMS, safety management system, in their training. Why? It's about identifying hazards. You guys want to know what the most dangerous thing is that you can do? Having one flight instructor fly with another flight instructor. Yeah. What's the most dangerous situation you can put yourself in? Having 2 flight instructors flying together. And a close second, 2 experienced pilots goofing off in a rental airplane. Why? Experienced pilots tend to do silly things. I'm sorry, it's true. They just tend to do dumb things. Safety management systems utilize a point system as far as danger. For example, flying at night might be 2 points. Flying in known icing conditions might be 3. If you're going to fly with another instructor, 5 points. Danger, 5 points. When you reach a certain threshold as far as points, like 21, that's when you typically have to communicate with either your chief pilot or your director of operations, and they'll ask you, how do you feel about still doing this flight? And then you'll have a discussion with them. Someone might ask, when would you ever get to 21 points? Here's an example. Flying to Aspen in the wintertime. Snowing, contaminated runway, clouds, mountains. So there's a lot of points. So flying into Aspen almost any time always raises the hazard of points easily over 21 points almost every single time. But SMS has come a long way in mitigating accidents and reducing accidents, and that's why it's incorporated in most aviation organizations. I want to thank everyone for joining, for watching. Again, this is Carlos, PC747. My first live stream. I've never done a live stream before. I release videos once a week. My next video will be going out tomorrow morning, starting at 5 a.m. Arizona time, and it goes out every 4 hours in 7 different languages. If you have any questions, please post them. Since I'm not able to read them here, I apologize for that, and I will answer every single question. Thanks so much. Take care.